Hey guys, on this video I will be talking about Hanna Season 2 Episode 4 from Amazon, and the episode is called Welcome Mia. So sorry it's been a while since I've done a Hanna review, but I'm back now and hopefully get on a bit of a roll to finish off the second season. So last episode we ended on a really big cliffhanger, and that was that Hanna had made her way to the institution, whatever you want to call it, the house, the grounds in Britain where all these girls are being trained and held, and they've got their kind of lives there. So she's there to obviously rescue Carla, or in her mind she's rescuing her. And it was a really dramatic scene where she got past a couple of guards. She was on the ground. She actually saw Carla from afar, and Carla saw her, but then she was outnumbered and they used the tasers on her and kind of broke her down and captured her. And obviously Carla saw this and was really kind of shocked and upset. And that was the cliffhanger of the last episode, so set up some exciting possibilities this time. The other big thing that happened, of course, was that Hanna essentially almost beat Marissa to death, really, because she found out that she'd been kind of working her and sort of working for John. And it was a really brutal scene where she, basically almost beat her to a bloody pulp. And you may remember, if you've seen my review of the third episode, I actually thought Marissa was dead. I thought that was just it, because it was such a dramatic sort of scene, and Hanna really went to town to her. Now, admittedly, it might have felt a bit cheap or a bit flat if they'd killed Marissa off like that, and this early too, because you're sort of set up to think she's going to be a big part of this season. So to kill her off after the third episode may seem a bit premature, and obviously, as it turns out, I was jumping the gun, because at the start of this episode we see that she's still alive. I can't say alive and well, because she really had her ass handed to her by Hanna. But we start with Marissa. We see her get up in the morning and she's all bruised and beaten, and she's the way she sells it is really great. She really carries it with her, physically. The actress does a great job, because we see her wearing sunglasses, we see her get off the plane at one point, but just the way she really physically carries it, because it's not just the fact that she was beaten almost to death, really. It's also that emotionally, psychologically, I think it's really embarrassing for her, because it went so wrong. And Marissa's one of these characters where she's in a grey area, where she's been caught between Hanna and then her loyalties to the sort of to the kind of the mission to the government. And I think certainly her loyalties appear to have swung more towards Hanna because of her personal connection with her, but she's still a very murky character. Certainly in the first season we were kind of trained really to see her as this sort of villain that really couldn't be trusted. She has quite an icy sort of presence to her. But I think this episode does a lot actually to maybe make you think that she is on Hanna's side after all, and to sort of turn that around. So she's contacted by John, and Marissa obviously is still keeping up the pretense that she's not seen Hanna and she hasn't come across her. and I think John maybe knows this is a lie, but anyway, he plays along with it and says, well, we actually picked her up last night because they found the agent dead, the one who was put on Hanna, who I think Marissa actually killed, if I'm remembering rightly. But he says, yeah, we've got Hanna. So Marissa's called in, and this episode has a very interesting and actually well handled twist at the end of it, and I think it's a twist that is well played because you can actually track it back to the start of the episode where Marissa's called in, and I think John knows a little more than he's letting on. So she's called in by John and she's assigned to Hanna. They've obviously got Hanna now and they're going to question her, and Marissa is told, go and talk to her, you can have this time with her. Now obviously the plan is that they want Hanna to be trained in the way of these other girls. They want her to join in the institute, and that from now on that will be her life, and she will become one of these. I mean, she's already very capable, but they see it as like moulding her into like a killing machine sort of thing. So Marissa talks to her, and it's a very tense scene. It's a really interesting scene because obviously Marissa is trying to talk to Hanna as if you can trust me and stuff, but at the same time she can't let on, or certainly in her mind she can't let on, that her and Hanna have had contact and have actually been like working together all this time. She can't give that away to John, who of course already knows this, I think, but Marissa doesn't know that. So she promises Hanna certain things. She says, well, if you work with me and kind of play ball, then we'll let you see Carla again. And she basically promises we can help you escape with Carla, or Marissa saying that anyway. I think she must have like shielded it from the camera or something, but so there's that scene, and I think it's a good episode, this. I think one of the weaker parts is some of the stuff with Carla and Hanna, just because Carla, in this episode, she's still very mad with Hanna, and it's gotten to the point now where they've actually moulded Carla, it appears, so Carla actually believes, hey, this is my life, this is a good sort of life for me, I have no one else to go to, because she lost her family and that from a young age. Whereas when she first got there, she was very suspicious and quite angry and not really willing to play ball. It does seem like she's come around to the idea in this episode. So she's actually very anti-Hanna when they first talk, but Hanna, because they arrange for Carla to meet Hanna, and Hanna says, I was told you could show me around, sort of thing. So she does that because that's almost appealing to her good side. But I think the problem I'm talking about is just the fact then, because for a lot of this, Carla is like really angry and quite stone-faced and just acting quite sort of cold towards Hanna. I think that maybe drags some of the scenes down in a way, because it's just a little forced in a way, maybe for a bit of drama. I guess it just makes it kind of unlikable, and I don't know, it's just not that interesting, I didn't think. But it's sort of a small complaint. So Hanna basically they go off the camera basically. They go down into like the basement, and Hanna tries to persuade Carla to escape with her. Now Carla, I should point out, her name now is Clemency, and that's obviously historically kind of relevant for for African American history. I'm assuming it's the same Clemency it's referring to, which there was a movie about recently. I can't remember exactly the case or the character, but I know there was a recent movie which I hear really good things about actually. But yeah, so I'm assuming the name they've given Carla, Clemency, is like intentionally referencing that. But yeah, so Hanna tries to talk her into escaping with her, but Carla / Clemency, who's insisting she calls her that, isn't having any of it really. She's not convinced. She seems to think she has freedom there. This is her life now, and it's kind of the way to go. And then the guards catch up with them in the cell, and it's actually a funny little cover because they're like, what are you doing here? And then they start smoking a cigarette, and it's like having a fag, for old time's sake. And it's just a funny like visual of them holding up the fag and smoking. It's a great little reaction and cover, but that's really good stuff. But yeah, I mean, that was obviously Hanna's hope to escape. So then she's kind of a little bit forced. Her hand's a bit forced. So it's almost like the best thing she can do at this point is to agree to go along with becoming part of the academy and the training and actually becoming one of the girls. And I guess she wouldn't try and plot her way out later on. So we see obviously she still have intention with Carla, but she agrees to join in the academy, and her name's Mia, so that's where the welcome Mia comes from the title. So at the same time, you're getting like this sort of subplot with Jules and with Sandy where they're starting to bond again, and they steal some booze off like this delivery truck, and there's a bit where Sandy's like flirting with the truck driver so that Jules can steal the booze. And we find out that the truck driver is actually, kind of in on a plot, like he's working with Leo. He like puts his thumb up to the camera, so it was kind of a setup for the girls, but we find out later on exactly what's going on. So they're starting to hang out again and have fun, and at the same time you've got sort of Hanna and Carla who are kind of reluctantly hanging out a little bit, but they start spending time together in a group. And this is something I mentioned on the last review, which I think could actually be a good way for them to go, is if you have this dynamic of all these, I mean obviously not too many because that would be too much, but if you had a group of these like characters like Hanna, Carla, Jules, Sandy, as kind of like this group, this gang who sort of bang together and ultimately branch out on their own. Obviously you could have them escaping the place come the end of the season maybe, but then you could have them in the long term, assuming there's going to be a season 3, you could have them as a group of like assassins or whatever the right term would be. But I could see that being a good way to like carry on the show and have fresh sort of storylines. But we'll see if they actually go that way, because I was a bit worried in this one that you might have this sort of separation type thing where you have Jules and Sandy doing their thing, and then you have Hanna and Carla, and it feels makes a lot more sense to kind of bring them together, and that's what sort of happens. So Jules is like, oh well, let's have a party sort of thing, and Hanna agrees to it. And I think this is where you're kind of going over old ground a little bit with Hanna, because she's like experiencing normal teenage stuff again, and she has booze sort of thing. So it's a little bit repetitive, but I guess the difference is that she's actually telling them about what happened in the first season, and she's kind of saying, oh yeah, I did have sex with a guy. And now I can't remember if she's lying actually, because I remember obviously her kissing a guy in that first season, and I remember it was the guy who Sophie was into, her friend, and I remember them getting very physical at one point, so they might have had sex. I just thought it was just more of a snog sort of thing, but they might have had sex. I can't actually remember. I think they might have done actually, but it's been a while now. But anyway, she sort of wins brownie points because of that, because she's had that experience with a guy. So she's starting to kind of fit in with the others. But then there's this twist with Marissa, because the cameras are watching the girls as they're having like this sort of party in their room. And Marissa like calls in to say goodbye to Hanna, because she says, I'm leaving now, but I'll be back another time. So she leaves the premises, and she's got a driver, and he sort of tells her to put a hood on as they're leaving, but then she's kind of like, well, can I put it on once we get like on the road or something? He's like, oh, I suppose. But Marissa has had this scheme cooking throughout the episode, because she had this sort of tracking device on her phone to set something up at the Institute. So she clearly had this plan to bust Hanna out. And what it is basically it disactivates like the lights in the building. And she left it kind of buried. Now she must have like a similar phone so she could track what was happening, but she left it buried somewhere. And we see at one point this guy find the phone, and he obviously then sort of tracks it. And so they end up setting that off where they disactivate the lights, and Marissa like sort of chokes the driver so she has control of the car, and she comes back to get Hanna. So obviously they kind of must have had planned that together. So she picks Hanna up in the car, but then John's waiting for her, so they've obviously cottoned on to what they're doing. And then Marissa, makes a run for it. Hanna runs inside, so Hannah's obviously intending to get her stuff and make a dash for it. But there's another twist, because the other girls are waiting for her in the room. Carla and everyone else, they confront her. So they were in on it. So it was a whole setup. It was this well-crafted plan, which means that I'm assuming Jules and Carla and Sandy and everyone were in on the whole booze thing. Because at one point they find out that Leo was in on it and says, oh, nice trick with the booze, and he makes it clear that he was like he had the guy playing him, because Jules being rebellious kind of gets pissed about it, saying, oh, we were played sort of thing. They were in on it. But then it turns out, I think that is part of the twist, where, you know, it was to get the party in motion so that they could set Hanna up, because they knew she and Arissa were going to try and escape. So that's the end of the episode, them all confronting Hanna in the room, which I really like, actually, because it's kind of unsettling, because they approach her, particularly Carla. She's kind of saying, well, just think, Hanna, for a minute. Maybe you do belong here. Maybe you can have a life here. It's possible. And they all start saying, we're your family now, Hanna. We're your family. So it's all kind of sort of on, like, eerie and ominous, because it's the kind of thing where they're surrounding her and they're almost quite mind-warped themselves. So yeah, there's definitely an eerie sort of quality to how it ends. But the twist actually did add up, I think, and was like really well played. So I liked the twist a lot, and it was a strong end to the episode. So yeah, that's episode 4 of Hanna season 2. I'm excited now to see what else happens in the remaining episodes, and I'll be back soon, hopefully next week sometime, with a review of episode 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you've been following along, if you've seen this episode. What did you think of it? Have you been enjoying the season overall? And I'll be back with more TV reviews soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.